Let's move on, shall we, to Matt Walsh asking the most dangerous question. So, Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire have released a new documentary called What is a Woman, which I have had the pleasure of watching. We're going to see a few clips of it. Don't want to spoil it too much. I think we might do a review of it for the website, so keep your eyes out for that. It's an excellent, just to give a quick one, excellent little documentary. My only complaint would be purely because of the fact that it has to be... you can only access it through the Daily Wire website through a subscription service, and I do think it's of the quality and important enough in its subject matter that it should get a wider release.
Get it in every cinema around the world.
I understand that cinemas aren't obviously going to want to be holding on to it, but at least try and get like a Blu-ray or DVD release so that people are able to share it with their friends more easily than you are just huddled around a computer. Although Amazon, Netflix, they're not going to want anything to do with it, so I would just like to see a wider release so more people can see it, because it is very good and it's very, very important. But it has, as you can imagine from what I've just said, got a lot of controversy. And we're going to look at some of the clips that have been spread around, and we're also going to take a look at some of the responses and what Matt Walsh has responded to personally as well. But before we go any further, just want to draw your attention to this premium Contemplations that Josh and I did recently.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun, especially given how dry the subject matter could have been, because we were talking about why sex is binary, and that's in the biological, concrete terms, why sex is binary.
So yes, I tried my hand at giving people a little biology lesson and went through some what should have been, school level science, more or less. Although
it was when I was in school, so
yes, I'm not sure it's in school so much anymore. But there we go. We go through it and we apply that understanding to lots of different articles in the media circulating about these sorts of things, and corrected them more or less with our correct understanding of biology based on biologists that aren't massive hacks.
Yes, the opinion being, of course, that biology matters, which many people would just deny nowadays. Anyway, so just a reminder as well that a lot of the activism that's being done by trans activists and all those types is being done out of concern and care for children and people who they think are going to be damaged by evil conservatives pushing back against it. But what they're actually doing is pushing children and lots of vulnerable people into decisions that will haunt them for the rest of their lives, which is kind of the point that Matt is trying to make throughout this documentary. Just to get a taster, let's take a look at a little bit of the trailer that was released earlier on in May that got a lot of people riled up to begin with.
What is a woman?
I like to make sense of things.
A woman is not anything in particular.
There is not one particular thing.
It could be many things to many people.
Some women have penises, right? Some men have vaginas.
I like scented candles, and I've watched Sex and the City.
Yeah.
How do I know if I'm a woman?
That's a great question.
You're not a scientist. You're not a gender studies major.
No.
How do you know that you're a man?
I guess because I got a dick.
That's great right there.
I'm looking forward to watching this, actually.
Yeah,
I haven't watched it yet.
Good fun. That sums up a lot of what he's doing there, which is just going around and showing that what's happening is that all of these professionals, these medical experts, these people with their gender studies degrees and all of these useless degrees are basically, and for all practical purposes relating to reality, completely useless and misinforming people because you're a woman's march, and now people are in an atmosphere where they can't give an answer to what a woman is. So what are you even marching for? Whereas just some guy running a Star Wars store is able to go, well, yeah, I've got male genitals. Obviously, I'm a man. There you go. And he's just raising the question, what is the point of the word? What is the point of the category if it doesn't relate to something concrete? It's not like happiness, which can be relatively subjective depending on who you're asking it to. The utility comes from being able to apply it to reality, which can help you to navigate the world. Because I don't know if you out there have spoken to women, but they can be very different to men, and it's kind of useful.
No way, I didn't know that.
I know, shocking nowadays, isn't it? But it can be useful to know these things so that you don't accidentally throw yourself in a social faux pas with women, for instance, by asking what their weight is. They generally don't like that one, whereas men are
when they ask you your height, that's what you've got to respond.
Of course, there are exceptions to these rules, but generally speaking, if you're meeting a woman the first time, don't open with that. Don't open.
Hello, nice to meet you. How heavy are you?
I've had a few slaps from encounters like that. But Going on to the social media response that it has received. So you've got people like Ben Dreyfus, who I'm not really familiar with before this, tweeting at Matt, who, if you scroll up a little, just so we can see what this was responding to, John. John, if you could scroll up just so we can see the tweet this is responding to, please. Thank you. Matt's just pointing out that by the logic that this guy's employing, waiting until puberty to castrate a child is a moderate position because, of course, Lupron and the puberty blockers that they give to children are used for chemical castration of convicted paedophiles, for instance. So I think there's a bit of a moral grey area, you could say, to be light on it, of giving that sort of drug to a 12-year-old. For instance, I think we can ask a few questions and push back against that.
I hate that they're using the term moderate as if there's a moderate position on protecting children, as in...
Yeah, the position is protect children.
Yes.
There you go. And it's so shocking to somebody that a conservative father of four, who I think is also a diehard Christian as well, Matt Walsh, would want to protect children. And he's pointing out that these people are monsters. Ben responds to that. Are you saying that eunuchs shouldn't be allowed to castrate themselves? My disgust at your opinion actually has to do with you stopping adults from doing what they want to their own body. I think it's pretty reasonable to be able to say, hey, you there with the knife, maybe don't castrate yourself.
Eunuch lives matter.
Eunuch lives matter indeed. And to be fair, Matt is getting to the point where I think he has actively said that he advocates that any and all transitioning should be illegal at any age, which... is a bit too far for me as it stands right now, but I can understand how he's come to that position.
I think that it's like saying, "Oh, I've broken my finger. Oh, I'm going to cut it off."
Yes,
it's taking the wrong approach to treating a dysphoria, basically.
Yes, I agree. I agree that it probably is. The problem is that the idea of looking into this scientifically is so taboo right now that there is like no ability to check out what other options there are for these people who are suffering from gender dysphoria or the depression and some.
There are lots of other dysphoric conditions where you can treat those with similar methods to gender dysphoria and vice versa, and these are actually perfectly ordinary psychological treatments.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with the point that he's making overall, which is that the medical industry that is administering these surgeries is reckless. It's hurting people for profit and for ideological purposes, and they're not acknowledging the consequences of what they're doing. And I like that you can see here. I'm not talking about what adults are allowed to do with their bodies. I'm talking about what doctors and drug companies should be allowed to do to other people's bodies for profit. So he's reframing the conversation because obviously you say, oh, are you against bodily autonomy? People, like, at the end of the day, people, you can get kitchen knives. You can do whatever you want to yourself with that kitchen knife.
Don't do that, though.
Don't do it, but... that is something that people can do. It is a point of like, yeah, but should doctors be able to do that? It's a restriction on the medical community who are taking advantage of this craze right now to make millions and millions of dollars. And let's take a look at a clip of somebody from the documentary who has sadly been the victim of this medical profiteering and this ideological pushing, who transitioned at 42, and what life is like for... they transitioned from female to male, but they obviously don't seem to be too happy with that decision, so I'll refer to her as a she for this. So let's carry on. It is very sad because as much as there are parts of the documentary, which I will show a few, which are very, very amusing, it really does also delve into the seriousness of this.
I think people shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it is something that has a human consequence to it. I think when you get caught up in the politics of it, you lose the human element, that people are going to genuinely suffer from this, and it is very sad.
These people are victims, I think, when you get down to the base of it, and it's just terrible to see what they're having to live with, because she is in a position where she's completely ruined her body, completely ruined her life. She's a mother, she's got children, and they're not going to be able to see her. She's not going to be there for her children as they grow up if what's happened to her will kill her, which sadly, due to all of those conditions that she mentioned, it probably will. And this is important to know about because we're doing this to 12-year-olds. We're doing this to 12-year-olds, putting them in the position where their bones will be brittle, they will have heart attacks, they will be medical patients for the rest of their lives. That used to be something that was generally recognized as being awful for a child with a medical condition that means they're a patient for the rest of their life, but this is just normal now. And Matt Walsh is pointing out that the left is terrified of the film, and they are saying that they if they thought they could debunk it, they would, but they can't even make fun of it for being poorly made because it doesn't have good production values. They can't debunk it, so they just insult it and cower in hopes it goes away. And let's take a look at some of the examples that Walsh has shared on his Twitter of this, because it seems that the Daily Wire sent out some review copies, emailed some publications to see if they would be able to review it and see what they think of it. And of course, here's some of the emails that they got back. Unsubscribe, written about 50 times. Unsubscribe, lose my email, forget my name. There's one that's basically just, I won't platform a transphobic bigot on the site. And another one that just says hard pass. So these are all very emotionally mature people responding to a difference of opinion. And there's more of it. I will also say that the emails there, they list the society memberships of some of these people, and some of them are like the society of the LGBTQ entertainment critics. So they've obviously targeted these for the people they knew would get a bad response from.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you are an organization dedicated to helping LGBTQ blah 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 blah, surely you would want to be open to criticism so that you can strengthen your own position.
Well, in an ideal world, having a free discussion where a certain side isn't forced out of the Overton window is the best way for people to make an informed decision in the first place, hearing both sides.
Yes, absolutely. And if you just go back to that last image there, John, that one here, we can see that one of them just responded with "do better" with a screen grab of a Time article saying anti-trans violence and rhetoric reached record highs across America in 2021. Obviously,
do better. Shut up.
With the implication being that the kind of rhetoric that Matt Walsh is pushing is causing these trans people to be murdered and have violence enacted against them. So what I decided just quickly to take a look into this article and see that what it's referencing. And it's taking information from the Human Rights Campaign, who are a pro-trans activist lobbying group. And they listed over 50 murders of trans people in 2021. And first of all, this obviously, the Time article is listing them as American, where some of them are all from, some of them are even listed as being from Puerto Rico, so immediately that's a dishonest headline right there.
Puerto Rico is part of America, unfortunately.
Oh, is it? Oh, goodness gracious. No, ignore me, I'm not American, I don't care.
I think I'll double check that actually, just to make sure. I don't want to correct you and then be wrong myself.
I don't know, that's all right. But I looked into the actual circumstances of some of these murders, and as much as I'm just saying this, I'm not pointing this out to be cruel, I'm not pointing this out as a gotcha, I'm trying to be honest about the facts in a way that Time and the Human Rights Campaign is not. I just took a list of the first 5 that were listed as being part of this new campaign of trans violence. And the circumstances generally were ambiguous and not really connected to them being trans. For instance, there was Tiana Alexander, who was murdered in Chicago's South Side. And when you see places listed as like Chicago's South Side in America, you know that sounds violent. So, of course, I typed in Chicago South Side in Google. One of the first responses that came up, the suggestions was Chicago South Side shootings today. So that's shootings today. So it's known to have shootings every day. And I think it was also a drive-by shooting in which another person was killed as well. So not related to them being trans. There was one called 50 Bands who was killed in an argument with a boyfriend. So that may have something to do with trans, but...
Yeah, John's got it. I was waiting for you to stop there.
Oh,
but
yeah,
yes,
of course.
It's like it remains a territory, but not necessarily a formal state. That's...
Oh, okay. So it's contentious whether they would be considered American or not, potentially.
Yeah, so technically, but yeah, not really.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much for that little educational lesson right
Sorry
there.
to throw you off.
Yeah, and then there's other people like Alexis Braxton who was found dead and the case is unsolved. So these sorts of headlines, I mean, as if it wasn't obvious enough in the first place, are just dishonest attempts to try and put the onus on random acts of terrible violence, which should not have happened because obviously any murder in these sorts of contexts, whether or not, it doesn't matter who it's happening to, is bad, but it is trying to take advantage of people's personal tragedies so that you're able to use it as a beating stick against conservatives who don't adhere to LGBT agenda. So always be aware when this sort of stuff is thrown into you. Take a look into the circumstances of these murders and see what they actually are. But because of the fact that these people have responded so violently against it, it's how you end up with this. which is the Rotten Tomatoes score, where it's a 98% audience score with over 500 ratings, with only one critic review, where the tomato meter has not even registered anything because they are terrified of watching this film. And I just thought I'd double check it. If we go on to this right now and see what the circumstances are right now. Oh, look, it's still 96% audience score with over 1,000 ratings, still only one critic review, because they are terrified of touching this. And honestly, no wonder they don't want to touch the film when there are parts of it in interviews and such that make the ideology look so foolish. And let's just watch a few of these clips. And this is one of my favourite ones, where he goes and talks to Dr. Patrick Grzanka, a gender studies professor at the university. Just obviously always got to bring it back somehow to, oh, why are you trying to ask people about their genitalia? No, I'm not. I don't want to see anyone's junk, guys, please. That's not what I'm doing. I just want to know the truth. But the truth is transphobic. How absolutely ridiculous.
It's nice to get it in a sentence, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and when he starts pushing back on it, you can see just his eyes go really dilated and start darting about the place. He looks incensed and panicked, and it's ridiculous. He's like, oh God, I don't normally get this in my classes. Normally the kids are brainwashed by the time they get to me.
I liked that Matt Walsh, when he's just like, so why's the truth? And he like folds his arms just like he's telling off a small child.
I mean, in effect, that is what's happening here. And we've got other interviews with Michelle Fossier, a paediatrician and professor. And Matt Walsh asks, so how young is it when kids can understand their gender identity? And let's take a look at this. That's not correct. That's not correct to just observe reality as it is. Can I also just mention how much I absolutely hate the sort of condescending, childish way that she was communicating with all the exaggerated facial expressions, the way she was talking, almost like she was talking to a baby. I absolutely despise it. But it goes to show the attitudes of these people. And then just to round this little bit off, he speaks to Marcy Bowers, the country's most prominent and busiest sex change surgeon. So as far as I'm aware, child abuser extraordinaire in America, as it stands right now. And Matt just is like, well, you know, there are other types of dysphoria where people want to have their arms cut off. What about them? And let's see her response. Completely irrelevant to everything I'm doing. You know, I'm more than happy to administer sex change surgeries to 12-year-olds, because in the interview she says, oh yeah, youngest I've done is 12. But, you know, if someone came to me asking to have their arm cut off, oh, that's just kooky, man. Don't worry about that. So this is why it's important to get this out here. It's just the fact that it's exposing this to a wide audience. There's obviously people calling him a Nazi transphobe. Let's take a look at the general response that Twitter gave from people who aren't film reviewers and just part of the general Twitter space, shall we? If we go to the next one. What have we got here? John, if we go to the next one. Oh yeah, it's a death threat. Giant comic anvil fell off a construction site and struck Matt Walsh in the head and instantly ended his life. Sounds reasonable to me. What have we got next? Is it another death threat? It's another death threat. Imagine if someone shot Matt Walsh in the head. This is a reasonable and sane person, wouldn't you say? And then we've got another one, if we go next, which is, I'm sick of transphobe YouTube ads. I hope Matt Walsh gets food poisoning.
Very specific.
I know, right? Not exactly a death threat, but still something unpleasant to wish on someone, surely. And then we've got JXy, who's a YouTuber who I actually enjoy the content of sometimes, but the media content, but sadly, his political takes are absolute trash fire garbage. It should be illegal for any doctor to give any care of any kind to Matt Walsh. Well, that's not particularly caring, is it?
No, that's not very nice.
That's not very nice at all. And then there's another death threat, of course. I can't believe Matt Walsh is dead. Given that he's not dead, that's a rather concerning thing to say. And then there is the last one here, which is just going the typical leftist route of just saying, if you don't agree with me, you're trying to genocide people, and saying that it's basically a transgender holocaust, just revealing how ridiculous and damaging the ideology is. But despite all of this, one of my favourite clips, you've seen a bit of it over the weekend,
I have, yeah.
is when he's in Nairobi speaking to the Maasai tribe, who, despite being, by all Western standards, a backwater, very primitive place, seem to have a much firmer grasp on this whole thing that we do, because you've not seen the later part of that clip. I'll just play a minute of it here, just to...
I wouldn't necessarily call them... backwards or a backwater. They've got it all figured out.
They do. They really do, don't they? But let's hear what they have to say on the whole distinction between what sexes are. So yeah, African tribes have it figured out, whereas over here we're saying that apparently babies can understand their gender identity.
They seem like good fun.
I know, right? So if that hasn't sold you on it, I don't know what will. Go check it out. Give the Daily Wire some support, because honestly, it is one of the most important films to come out this year. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can become a member and find all of our premium content on lotuseaters.com, including the latest Contemplations, number 75, What Makes Good Art, which was a discussion between Bo and Josh. If you're interested in finding Josh on social media, you can find him on Getter at Josh_firm. Thank you and goodbye.